A French woman named Gisele Pelicot took the entire world by storm last week when we all caught wind that she was publicly testifying against her husband. Thanks to her being brave enough to step forward publicly, we are learning about all of the horrific and gruesome and disgusting details about what she endured from her husband for 10 years. And I think what's most scary about this is she had no idea any of it was going on until it was all about to end. So, this is a disturbing one and an ongoing one. So, sit back and take a deep breath. It's time to let the fresh air in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back, or welcome if you're new. My name is Erin, and I am fascinated by all things cult, true crime, and unique spiritual practices. So if you like this sort of thing, please consider subscribing. I would absolutely love to have you here. I also have a Matreon. I have a membership and a Patreon, and please feel free to join either of those if you feel like you want a little bit extra. So I want to jump right into this story because I feel like by the time I post this, there's going to be more updates. So this is a trial that is currently ongoing. And since there are allegedly 72 people involved, the trial is going to be going all the way through mid-December. So I'm going to be keeping you guys updated on this as things move forward. Now, with certain details, I will need to be a little bit vague just because personal information has come out about some of these perpetrators, and it's been in certain publications, certain media sources. And this week, the lawyers for those individuals have come out and said that they're going to be coming after anyone that shares public information that could hurt the lives of these perpetrators, which is like, why did you do what you did then? You didn't think it would all come out eventually? You've literally been R-wording a woman while her husband, I'm going to just say, instead of and have to edit that out a million times, I'm going to say put to sleep for the duration of this video. And I will have to use some protective wording. I think you're all smart. You'll know exactly what I mean. So, first of all, we're going to discuss all of the things that we know happened to Gisele right now at the hands of her husband, Dominic. Then we are going to go into Dominic's life and the timeline of the events that occurred all the way up until now, the trial, and then we'll break down the most recent updates from the trial. Like I said, this is ongoing. I filmed this the day before posting it, so I've tried to be as up to date as possible. But let's jump into why this has taken the entire world by storm. So, in September of 2020, Dominique Pelicot was caught by a security guard of a store because he was trying to take pictures up women's skirts. He was trying to do this to multiple women all in the same store. And so he was arrested and taken in for questioning. So the police took his phone because he obviously had explicit images on them of non consenting women. And then they seized his computer and discovered that it was worse than they ever could have imagined. They found over 20,000 videos and pictures of one woman, and it happened to be his wife, Gisele. Now, in these pictures, it was very clear and apparent that she was unaware of what was being done to her. It seemed like she was unconscious, completely out of it. And luckily, the police were like, this is absolutely insane. We need to conduct an investigation into this. Who is this woman? Who are all of these men? Because it wasn't just her in compromising positions with her husband, unbeknownst to her. It was her in these compromising positions with hordes of other men, 72 other men to be exact. So one day, Dominic goes home to Giselle and tells her that the police need to speak to her. Apparently, he is crying, he's emotional, and he admits that he was taking pictures up women's skirts. And Giselle knew that he had certain curiosities about other women. He had asked that they open up their relationship and become swingers at one point, and she refused. And had a little bit of a history of, like, his head on a swivel when it came to other women, and he did watch certain explicit material that he would find online. But they had been married for decades. I mean, they're both in their 70s now. So obviously, Giselle really thought she knew her husband. He tells her that the police want to talk to her because of the incident of him taking those pictures and videos up those girls' skirts. Apparently, he is crying as he confesses this to her. She thinks she's mentally prepared to go talk to the police in November of 2020. But unfortunately, her world would completely tumble to the ground. It would just all come crashing down. They showed her hundreds of pictures, and they were alleging to her that her husband had her food and her water and would invite men over to their home so that he could watch them and film them and take pictures of them, R wording his wife. Poor Giselle had no idea any of this had gone on at all, not even one time. She had no idea. And so she was extremely horrified to learn that it had been going on for 10 years, since 2011. Just think about that for a second. You think you've had this happy marriage with its challenges, of course, but for the most part, it's a peaceful, happy marriage. You are in the midst of your retirement. You're living a quaint life in a tiny town of 6,000 people, just 6,000 people. And then you find out that your husband has been going online and offering you up as some kind of object to random men to come over and sleep with. She said that it came out that these were people who she knew too. Neighbors were coming over to her house. They knew this was going on, and nobody said anything to anybody. They just played into her husband's depraved, maniacal, disgusting game. She would run into people at the grocery store and say hi to them, having no idea that they had R worded her. Allegedly, back in 2011, when the couple lived in Paris, Dominic had kind of like proposed the idea of opening up their relationship and swinging. And this comes up in the trial very frustratingly, but his wife had had a very brief affair over the duration of their marriage, but she maintains that she only knowingly slept with two men, this affair partner and her husband. And let me be very, very clear. Her having an affair does not make her complicit, does not make her asking for it. It's actually really aggravating that her husband's lawyers even brought that up as if it dismisses all of the allegations, as if it has any relevance to her being put to sleep by her husband. So apparently, back in 2011, I'll get right back on track. Dominic was going online and he had found these forums for people that had certain fetishes. And he started posting pictures of his wife and basically inviting people to come over. So, what the night looked like is this: he would have people drive over to his home and he would put substances into his wife's food or drinks. And he would have the men wait outside down the street for about 30 minutes to an hour until she was, for lack of a better term, and since YouTube has so many rules, until she was essentially knocked out unconscious. Then he would force the men to come over. They had to disrobe all of their clothing in the bathroom. They were not allowed to smell of anything foreign. You know, they couldn't smell like cologne. They couldn't have eaten something recently. They definitely couldn't have smoked because he was worried that his wife would smell it in the house or in the home and find out. So he had all of these rules, except he didn't care if they used protection. He didn't care if they had been tested against HIV or other STDs because his wife ended up contracting not just HIV, but 3 other STDs/VDs that she had no idea where they would have come from. Can you imagine the confusion and the shame? And I think if am correct, she underwent physical examinations after she figured all of this out. So as far as I know right now, I don't think that she had gone to the doctor for any gynecological issues pertaining to these R words prior to finding out what her husband had done. However, she was very, very confused because she was losing huge chunks of time. Apparently, after these R words, she would literally wake up at like 6 p.m. the next day. So she'd essentially sleep throughout the whole rest of the next day and wake up and not remember a single thing that happened before dinner. So she thought she was getting Alzheimer's. Can you imagine thinking that are you're getting a disease that is so hard to reconcile with, to understand? It changes your personality, it changes who you are, it changes all of your relationships that you have with your loved ones. And you're trying to figure out how to make yourself better. And then come to find out that it's actually because your husband is putting you to sleep and inviting people over, strangers over to do whatever they want to you. And not only that, he is taking videos and pictures of them and saving them to his computer under a label in a folder literally labeled abuses. Are you kidding me? I mean, talk about betrayal. This is like a whole other level of betrayal. And something that people have been pointing out online too is the shock and disgust that none of these men went to the police. No one thought this is really bad. Some of these men were repeat offenders. One guy, I think it was the guy that had HIV, did it 6 times. And this happened 200 times over 10 years. Do you know what that breaks down to? That's almost monthly. For 10 years, her husband was doing this to her almost monthly. It just absolutely breaks your heart. And not only that, this man is also discovered to have had a folder completely dedicated to his only daughter, and it featured pictures of her in her underwear. And it was so disturbing to her that she is convinced that he did the same thing to her, at least himself did it to her. She actually wrote a memoir. It's in French. I'm not sure if there's a English translation out yet. There wasn't when I was first researching this video, but by the time you're seeing it, it might have been translated because, like I said, this is just raising red flags all over the world. But it's heartbreaking. Now, Gisele has to be one of the bravest women of our century because this is something that I think anybody would be tempted to put their head in the sand, get through it, not draw any attention to it. But she is going through all of this publicly. We would not know these details unless she shared it publicly. I mean, some of the quotes that she shared in her testimony are just gut wrenching, and her entire testimony is in French. I would love to sit and watch it with you guys. Maybe we'll get a translation soon and I can do that. But she says it was like she was in hell and didn't know it. It was depraved, like it was this sick game her husband was playing with her, and she had no idea what was going on. When Gisele learned what her husband had been doing to her for a decade, she bore the responsibility of telling her children. And she said that when she told her daughter let out a scream so intense that it's something that she will never, ever forget. I can't imagine living my life with somebody, trusting them with my heart, my children, my whole life, building an entire life with somebody and finding out that they cold-heartedly and without any care for me were letting almost 100 men R-word me. It's so hard to wrap your brain around it as like an empathetic human being that that thought would even come into somebody's brain. That thought would even that idea would even pop up. Like, this is the only time I'll ever say this, but it's like, just go cheat on your wife if you are this type of a person. Like, why do you? That's still a betrayal, but I mean, at least you're not literally doing one of the worst things you could possibly do to someone. I just cannot imagine how Gisele feels right now, and her bravery throughout this ordeal is inspiring and impressive. And honestly, it makes me really, really sad that she has endured this and has to relive it, or maybe even live it for the first time. So, to break down all the numbers that we have right now, this happened over 200 times in about a 10-year span with 90 strangers, 72 of which are identified and 50 of which are currently on trial. They're all being tried, and they are people that she knew. They're people she didn't know. They're people with all kinds of different professions that respectable professions it's just shocking to hear that anyone's okay or would be okay doing this. And what's even more frustrating is they literally say, "Oh, I didn't know it was an R word. I thought I was just helping this guy in his fantasy." That doesn't make it better that you're okay to sleep with an unconscious woman just because her husband says it's okay. Both of you need to consent. If that's something you want to do, you should be asking the woman who it's going to be done to, "Hey, are you okay with this role playing game? Is it okay if I do this with you?" You don't just listen to her husband say, "Oh, yeah, come do this to my wife." Absolutely not. So 18 of those 50 identified men are being held in jail but are being tried. Two are attending the trial as quote unquote free men, which does not seem fair at all to me, but they're all facing up to 20 years in prison, and they better all go to jail, if you ask me. But yesterday was the most recent trial date, and we get a little more understanding about who Dominic is as a human being. And as much as I'm fascinated by the psychology of criminals and why they do what they do, I feel like sometimes people use it as an excuse for their behavior. Like, "Oh, well, they experienced this when they were a kid, so that explains why they ended up like this." And to me, I'm just like, that still does not justify behavior. And I'm not saying that the psychologists and the experts that they had in the trial this week are implying that at all, but it does give you a little bit more of an insight to this type of person and to the person that he is. So, as I'm sure you can guess, he was brought up in somewhat of a volatile family. And it's said that his father, Dennis, was very, very abusive to him. And not only to him, but apparently the family like took in a young girl at one point. I don't know if they necessarily like adopted this girl, but apparently this man also was abusive to the girl that they had like taken in under their care. The experts yesterday also shared that Dominic had told them that when he was 9 years old, a male nurse actually ended up R wording him. And they said that this traumatic event could have triggered a trauma response that basically created a split personality. So that's why we're seeing, or I suppose Giselle is now realizing that he had this Jekyll and Hyde ability where he would seem so like outwardly ordinary and kind and loving and be a caretaker. And then behind closed doors, he was perverse and disgusting and had these really gross ideas and was maybe even a necrophiliac. So the experts who analyzed him psychologically are saying, like, this must be where all of this behavior is stemming from. And just to bring it back to his dad for a second, his dad was very, very controlling and apparently forced him to get a job when he was 14. And that was so he could then take 80% of that income. So he forced his son to get a job and then took 80% of the income and just like pocketed it. So I'm sure this made Dominic feel these feelings of inadequacy, like he had no control over his life. But it doesn't excuse any of the behavior. I just want to make that abundantly clear. These experts describe Dominic as self centered and manipulative. He's described as being very ordinary. He was mediocre in school. He worked in what the French call a nuclear sector. I'm not 100% sure what that means, if it's like a nuclear power plant or he was like an engineer. I'm not 100% sure. And then he had a moderately, that's what they said, I'm literally quoting, a moderately successful real estate career. So he was a very unassuming, but not necessarily successful guy. It seems like this was what he was successful at, if you could call it that or consider it that. It just is interesting because I feel like the perpetrators that we have been featuring on my channel very frequently, like the cult leader who created Children of God, he was also unsuccessful in his life until he was like 40 and he finally became a successful cult leader. It's just like these mediocre men need a better hobby, or they need to go to therapy, or just like channel their energy into something positive, because this is absolutely crazy. Stop taking out your own shit on other people. It's not about them. It's about you, bro. Like it's actually crazy. It's just always so funny because it's like women get berated for our emotional reactions, and it's like, well, maybe if men were more in touch with their emotions, they wouldn't do stuff like this. But that is a rant for another day. Calm down, Erin. What's so heartbreaking about this is Gisele and Dominic were essentially high school sweethearts. They met when they were teenagers. They met when they were 18 years old. And then they were married kind of soon after in the 1980s, I believe. They had a seemingly beautiful life together. They had 3 children, 2 boys and 1 girl, and 7 grandchildren together. So a seemingly sweet family and a wonderful life. You might even call it charmed or romantic. I mean, this is a sweet couple living in France, in Paris, no less. They have 3 beautiful children who grow up and have 7 children of their own collectively. They end up retiring in 2011 in southern France. So one would believe, wow, it's like a picture perfect fairy tale life. Like if you just heard that, you'd be like, wow, that sounds wonderful. So to find out that for decades, Dominic was basically hiding a double life is just so, so disturbing, because guess what? He didn't just hurt his wife in this way. He hurt multiple women and allegedly killed one, but maybe even more. That remains to be seen. In 1991, he allegedly R-worded and murdered a 23-year-old girl. And so conveniently, he admits to the R word, but not the murder. So that, like I said, remains to be seen. Then a few years later in 1999, it's discovered, in retrospect, of course, that he R worded a 19-year-old girl. And he denied this initially, but then DNA evidence turned out to prove that it was him. So this is like a severe and scary pattern of behavior already. And I can only imagine that those weren't the only 2. I just feel like it's kind of rare for people who are perpetually committing such atrocities like this that they take decades long breaks. Some people online are speculating that perhaps he was inspired to do these acts by a movie. Apparently, around the mid 2000s is likely when he asks his wife to like swing and open things up, and she says no. And according to the experts who were on trial, the psychologists who kind of like tested him, he literally was like, oh, well, she said no to swinging, so the only other thing I could do was put her to sleep and have men come over and R-word her so I could get off on it, basically. He said those things. And I was going to save this to the end, but this feels like an opportune time to bring this one up. But he also said to his psychologists that this is ruining his life. Um, yeah, I'd hope it's ruining your life. And he says everything would have been fine if his wife never found out. Everything would have been fine if he hadn't been caught because he would have just kept doing it and his wife never would have found out. Are you crazy? Talk about not showing any signs of remorse. Are you kidding me? You're like, it sucks I got caught. It sucks that you did the behavior. That comment alone makes me want him to be put away for the rest of his life in a cell where he doesn't even get to see the light of day because how atrocious, how disgusting. Where is the respect? Where is the love? It's just imagine devoting your entire life and building a family with this man. I can't. Back to the mid 2000s. His wife basically says, "No, I do not want to swing. I do not want to open up our relationship." And around this time, a couple movies come out. So people are kind of speculating that maybe he got the idea from one of these movies. So in 2006, a movie that depicts a similar story called Not My Life comes out. And then in 2009, there is a Lifetime movie called Desperate Escape that depicts a similar story that comes out. So he starts doing these things just a couple of years later in 2011, but not before he R-words his wife in her sleep. And she realized what was happening and said she didn't like that. She did not want that to happen. So instead of, respecting her boundaries and not being effing disgusting, he decides that he's going to go online, he's going to watch explicit materials, and he comes across some websites where you can share your fantasies with other people online. And this is where he gets the idea that he can basically chat to strangers and invite them over to his house. So the first time he put his wife to sleep and invited a stranger over to R-word her was in 2011. And this is while they were living in France. So in 2013, they retire and they move to the south of France. And they moved to a tiny town of just 6,000 people. It's Mazan, France, and I'm sure I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. It's kind of difficult for me to pronounce French words. And he's still doing it. Imagine thinking you're retiring with your husband to live a beautiful life in southern France, and 10 years later, you find out that he's been doing it. And what's most heartbreaking is if he wasn't found out and arrested in 2020, it would still be happening to her. It's caused emotional distress. I mean, distress isn't even the right word. It's not strong enough of a word. It's caused emotional trauma. It's caused physical problems on her body, gynecologically. But I can't imagine what being so unconscious due to substances, I'm obviously trying to use protective language here for YouTube, but so often I'm sure it has implications for her mental health. And I don't just mean protect the way we talk about right now about, oh, protect your mental health. I mean neurological health. It had to have affected her very, very, very negatively. So this, like I said, this trial is ongoing. Apparently, Dominic had to leave the trial yesterday because he was just not feeling sick and not being well cared for. And it's it's very interesting that the day you're basically getting diagnosed and told how messed up you are, because it's the day that all the medical experts are here to talk about your mental state and how deranged you are suddenly sick. I mean, I think you should have had to sit there and be sick there. But then I guess that would be disruptive to everybody else. This is it's disgusting. It's heartbreaking. It's maddening. There really aren't words to describe how horrifying this whole situation is. To be victimized so brutally by your husband for so long. I mean, we talked briefly in a video about worldview trauma, and it's a trauma that occurs that just makes you rethink so many aspects of how you see your life, how you see the world, how you see human beings. And it can happen when someone does something like cheating on you or betraying you in another way. But this is ultimate physical trauma, emotional trauma total worldview trauma. And honestly, it didn't happen that long ago. I mean, he was only stopped in 2020. She found out barely 4 years ago that her husband was doing this to her. So the amount of bravery that it's taking for her to speak out about this is admirable, because she's literally openly, publicly sharing this story, sharing her trauma so that other women can be protected. Because this is something you would never think would happen to you. And she's saying, if it happened to me, and it started when I was in my late 50s, when I thought I was retiring with my husband, it can happen to you. And that is such a scary thought to have at all. But it's true. And it's just so deeply, deeply horrifying. And I'm so grateful for her bravery. When Gisele testified last week, she said that she had no idea how she survived, and she doesn't know how she's going to rebuild her life. She said that she thought she was just getting blackouts because of Alzheimer's. That's what she was led to believe. She even had joked with her husband one day when she was going through all these blackouts and trying to figure out what was going on, and made a joke like, "Oh, have you been drugging me?" And he was offended. He had the audacity to pretend he was offended and said, "Do you really think I could do something like that to you?" You did, and worse. And she did say that since that day that she went into the police station, she has not had a single blackout. I feel like this is going to take her a really, really long time to heal from, if she ever fully does. And I really hope that it's helping her and healing her to be public with this and see the impact that she's having on women's across the entire globe. The more women that speak out about their experiences, the more we're able to understand those experiences and hopefully watch out for them and protect ourselves from them. It's so sad that sometimes you can't even trust the very people that you live with to not harm you, to not hurt you. When in fact, when it comes to crimes against women, statistically, it's almost always the person that they love the most, their spouse, their partner. And it's really just tragic to think about. And so we will continue watching this trial and see how it all plays out. I again want to publicly commend Gisele. Like, what a brave doesn't even begin to describe it. I just don't even think there are appropriate words in the English dictionary to accurately describe the horrors that she underwent and is going through right now. And the bravery that she has to speak out about this publicly is huge. It's massive. And I really hope she sees justice. So I want to know what you guys all think about this. I'm sure we'll be on the same page about this one because it is so disturbing. And please just be safe out there. Don't let anybody gaslight you into thinking that whatever you're experiencing, whatever red flag you're experiencing when it comes to a partner is wrong. Believe in your instinct, believe in yourself, believe in what your body knows, because sometimes it's hard to listen to that tiny voice that's trying to scream out to us that there is danger and it's really close by. But please listen to it always, and please protect yourself. I know this was a heavy one. Let me know if you want ongoing coverage of this trial. I might do a bi-weekly one, like a bi-weekly episode to update you guys on what's going on here. So let me know if that's something that you're interested in. And other than that, I will see you in my next video very soon. Please stay safe out there, ask questions, and always stay skeptical. Thank you all so much again. Bye.